congratulations on the film. What is it like being out in the middle of nowhere on what seems to be some fairly inclement weather with Matt Smith and this fantastic film?
Yeah, it was. I love that when you're making a film. I love when the weather really is part of the scene and part of your emotional life as a character. I mean, in the case of Matt and Morfydd, like their characters, they go on such a huge emotional journey with grief, and the weather just really kind of, I think, informed that. And my character coming into that, the supporting characters, they sort of enter into the world, and it ends as it ends for some of them, and the weather just kind of adds to that really, and made it kind of easier to act in a way.
Yeah, there's one bit where it snows quite heavily, and I'm thinking, the budget would not stretch to VFX snow. That's got to be cold.
No, yeah, that's real snow you're seeing right there. Yeah.
And where did your involvement start with this? How did you get to hear about this, the part and the story?
Yeah, I worked with Dan on his first film, Apostasy, and so I got sent the script slightly later on. I came a bit later onto the project, and when I read it, I loved the way it explored grief and folklore and spirituality again, which is probably a sort of running theme in Dan's work, I think. Just the way it kind of takes on this whole magical way that it kind of tells the story, the way these characters process their grief.
And it doesn't paint bad guys or good guys in a simplistic way. All the characters are very complex and have immense depth to them. So, how did you feel that you were working with them and developing those characters?
Yeah, I think what I find working with Dan is that it's as you're on set doing the scenes, the script is really kind of like growing. It's still kind of breathing and stretching and whatnot, So as you get there on the day, what you think it's going to be at the start of the day, it kind of maybe turns out to be something different. But I think with Stephen, my character, his relationship with Matt's character Richard is two kind of men in the 70s, and one of them is going through a grieving process, and the other one is kind of unable to really be there for him, and they're not really connecting with each other, and he's not really sharing anything other than his obsession about digging in this garden, digging up this thing under the earth, and I think it's kind of their stories specifically. I found that something quite interesting in that male kind of disconnection between two men, and obviously there's a massive disconnection with him and his wife, and ultimately that kind of pays out.
And it's interesting that you say that the script was kind of leaving it living, breathing and morphing, because obviously that's one of the big themes of the film.
Yes.
And the things that change.
Yeah, for sure.
So where does this kind of sit for you? Because I was saying to Danny, it's for me, I'm not a horror fan, but I love this because it's not a horror film for horror for.
Yeah,
it's a film for people who don't like horror.
Yeah, it's weird to call it a horror film because it doesn't feel like that. It's much more psychological, and I think it's much more based in kind of folk stories and feelings and what. Yeah, it's not like a kind of jump out your seat kind of horror, but there are scary moments to it, obviously. But it kind of creeps up on you. It's more the emotional lives of the character that become on display, and you sort of see how that plays out, and you see how scary that is, rather than kind of someone, an assassin going around killing people, whatever.
And for me, it follows a similar vein to things like The Wicker Man or Midsummer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Do you think it's like?
Yeah. It's got that kind of. It's definitely got that Midsummer element to it. It's a great kind of reference to The Wicker Man as well. And I think Dan, had found a lot of like references in kind of 70s films and content that he kind of pumped into the film as well. So it's got almost like a unique genre really, but definitely worth seeing for sure.
Well, congratulations on your part in this fabulous film. It's great to speak to you, and I hope you have a great evening.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey, you guys!
Hey, you guys!
Hey, that's what they all say.
Hey, you guys!
Hey You Guys!